Corners there? Yeah, great. Attendance has been taken. Councillor Coleman won't be here tonight. He finally got onto his fields, so he's doing farming things. So he's not going to be with us tonight. Everyone else is here. Approval of the agenda, please. Councillor House.
I'd like to move the approval of the agenda with a small request to shift the library delegation 4C to position 4B, as it's a brief delegation. There'll be people who can just probably want to leave after it's over.
Councillor Miller?
I have an in-camera item I'd like to bring up. Well, I'd like to discuss an in-camera item from the planning. So I don't know where the best spot to do that is, whether we leave it to, I don't know whether we do that after or during the Planning Advisory Committee report under 8C, or we leave it till 15, item 15.
So you want something added to in camera?
No, I'd like to discuss an in-camera item from the public, from the Planning Committee.
Okay, so we'll put that
And I don't know where the best spot is to do that.
information.
In camera.
Yep. Okay, so we'll put it in camera right after in camera.
Sure.
And Councillor Howes, we bumped the library up to number 2. Thank you. All those in favor of the agenda as it's amended? Thank you. Anyone opposed to that? Declaration of pecuniary interest. Anyone have any now? Thank you. Delegations. 4A, Ontario Clean Water Agency, has a check presentation.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council, municipal staff. Happy to present a good story regarding some work that Ontario Clean Water Agency has done at the Paris Waste Pollution Control Plant. In December 2017, Aqua submitted a proposal to the County of Brant to install a variable frequency drive on a 200 horsepower centrifugal blower. These blowers are the lungs of the facility. They're a critical piece of equipment, and they also represent one of the higher costs of operating these facilities. This variable frequency drive allowed us to modulate the speed of the blower, which in turn allowed us to control how much air and therefore how much energy we actually expend on the aeration process. The project in total generated an annual energy savings of 304,790 kilowatt hours. It's an actual energy cost savings of $42,670 per year. And it also generated some incentives through the P4P program of approximately $30,479, not including HST. The actual project cost was $134,500, and that basically equates to a 2.5-year payback on this. So without further delay, I'd like to present the check for $34,441.27.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's a great way to start a meeting. Yes, I know. Okay, the library, you've been bumped to second place. If you want to, yeah, see if you can beat that check.
Whoops,
Sorry.
Where are we at? She's going to get us up on the screen. Greetings, Your Worship. I'm here tonight to bring the regards of the whole County of Brant Library Board to you and to Council. It's been a while since we've been here, and we're here tonight to give you a bit of an update on where the Library Board is in our process towards a new library in the town region of Paris. So, with no further ado, I'm going to try to accomplish this very quickly on your night with a long agenda so that you've got some time for questions at the end. Okay, just to give you a bit of background. This process towards a new central main branch library for our library system located in Paris has been underway for a number of years now. We came to council in 2016 with a report from our consultant, an assessment of the current library facility in Paris, and that report and the recommendation was that the current structure that we have was beyond its life as a library in terms of its ability to serve the residents in the Paris catchment area with a 21st century library service. In the interim years, just where did that demand or that urgency come from? Since 2006, the circulation in the County of Brant Public Libraries has risen by 22%. And our traffic through the door has risen 220%. Across the system, our circulation in that same time period, 26 to 2018, has seen a 71% increase in our circulation and a 64% overall increase in patrons coming through the door. So in a time of relatively stable population growth, our library service was growing by leaps and bounds, and continues to. So again, we had a needs assessment done in 2016. It confirmed that we had a need for a new library structure of about 20 to 25,000 square feet. And the recommendation, I know this is a discrete thing, was to build a main branch, a headquarters, a branch that could serve all of the county with some of its programming and offerings, and then support that administrative function for the system as well. We really haven't had that since the amalgamation of the county and the library system. We had a site selection committee formed in 2017. Our same consultant considered sites available in the area with a particular emphasis on county-owned property. They came back to us with 5 sites. We did some extensive community consultation. What we heard was the folks in Paris were pretty adamant that they wanted to see any library service situated in the downtown. We respected that. We looked at our options and came to the previous council last October with our recommendation that the SILAP site was perhaps our best option. Now, since then, we've had some new developments. There's been a focus of interest on the downtown in Paris. We were very interested observers at the open house where the proposed redesigned downtown was presented to the community. And in that, and with other things in mind, we saw that perhaps there are real possibilities to relocate the new library between the two rivers, the Nith and the Grand, in a redeveloped downtown. And for the library board, we see lots of advantages to that. Again, we heard at the open houses that the community would like to see the library in the downtown. Some of the terminology used at the open house about the library being a cultural anchor for the community certainly resonated with the library board. The idea of a sort of focal area on culture along the Broadway with a library as a part of that would certainly be appealing to the community, and again, the library board sees great potential there. So given the promising vision for downtown, the library board is reconsidering moving our preferred location from outside the downtown core on the other side of the Grand River into the downtown core. And we are looking for an opportunity to investigate all options, all alternatives that would be in that proper downtown area. And when we're talking about the spine down Broadway, certainly the current OPP detachment would hopefully be one of those sites, along with any others that might be available in the downtown. So finally, just looking at how this benefits the community, as I've said before, as I've stood in front of you, the library gives back a great deal economically to the community. The dollars that you spend on your library service, that money flows through your community and grows anywhere between $5 and $7 in service and value to businesses and residents. It would certainly make the library would make the downtown viable. It would bring people to the downtown throughout the week, throughout the day. We know we have our guests in the downtown as well, but a consistent sort of traffic of people, having the residents know that the downtown is for them, and having that social and cultural focal point for our community, that's how we make a community, is to have it in the downtown. So for businesses, again, putting lots of people and wallets and pedestrians into the downtown consistently, I think, would help them. So finally, our next steps that the library board has done, we have reestablished our site selection committee. We're in contact again with our consultant to engage them in considering sites more focused on the downtown, and with particular attention to that cultural spine on Broadway between William and Mechanic Street, including the OPP detachment and others. And we're just here tonight to request council's support for this expanded lens for the library board to continue this process with our consultant and in consultation with county staff. And with that, if you have any questions, Alice, the vice chair of the board, and I will do our best. And if we don't have the answer, Kelly's over there and she will help.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for presenting this. I think it's a very prudent idea, and I know it's responding to some public comments that were made about whether it's the bottom of the parking garage or other places that we could look at on Broadway, also as an anchor for youth in our community, and I like that you mentioned that. In the interest of time and efficiency, because it is an ever-changing downtown picture, would you be open as a library board to having a member of county staff sort of on the site selection process, just to help share information as it becomes available and things like that? Would that be helpful?
Well, I through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to reassure Councillor LaFerriere that our CEO is in constant contact with senior staff in the county. So it's not, I don't think it's really possible for us to go off on a tangent or anything. We're tethered pretty well to the county staff. Is there anything you want to add to that, Kelly? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the delegation? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For my information, I'm not sure I know the number. Can you tell me what the size of the current main library is, to give me a sense of how big the structure might be relative to the one we currently have?
I don't know the exact square footage, but Kelly does. But I will say this, Councillor Bell, through the mayor to you, that the building as we have it now is compromised by a number of things. Multi-floor. It also has to house our administrative function. And, you know, it's also problematic in terms of the fact that even in this nice weather, we have patrons who have difficulty getting into it with the slope on the street. And it lacks a loading dock. I think everybody in Ontario learned in the last couple of months that libraries actually have trucks that come and go from them. And it would be nice to have a loading dock. So square footage wise, I don't think there's a number that big right now for the structure that we have, and then again, it's compromised by the architecture. Is there anything you could add, Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The current building is 14,000 square feet, spread out over 3 floors. plus an attic space, which is not accessible. As Fred mentioned, we have a number of challenges in terms of accessibility and ergonomics within the building. Moving around, having any kind of flexible space is an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, thank you. And just to be clear, I'm very supportive of what you're proposing.
Councillor,
I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank Councillor Bell for the question, because it's another opportunity to kind of reiterate that point. Thank you.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the library delegation. And this is a bit of a question, a bit of a clarification for some people who might be observing this meeting and don't necessarily understand the backstory to the library site selection. And at the end of the day, the new library, there will be a new library, and it'll be in a building that is provided by the county one way or another. I love the idea of it being between the two rivers. I think that's an excellent ingredient in our vision for downtown Paris. Circling back to the site selection process, can you just touch a little bit more on how we would coordinate the efforts of the libraries, site selection criteria with the ever-changing moving pieces of what's happening with downtown?
What we've said to the community, even as we were doing our site selection and community consult before, when we had the 5, we came to council, we recommended the SILAP site, but we gave ourselves a little proviso that we reserve the right to be dynamic and respond to emergent situations as they came along. And I guess what we're doing tonight is evidence of that. And again, I'll go back to the fact that our CEO is liaising with senior county staff on an ongoing basis about this. I know that the vision for the downtown that we saw at the open house was a proposal, but whether it looks exactly like that or not, I think there's real merit in what we're talking about in terms of location, as you said, and it is consistently been the desire of the community to see the library in that part of our community. That's been the consistent thing. So I'm just being very optimistic and hoping that'll find its way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the delegation. Fred, I'm just curious here because this site selection has been going on for quite some time, and the OPP station has been known for a few years now that it's going to be vacated, going to a new facility. Knowing full well, absolutely, there was the consensus was by the public that they want to keep it downtown. I just want to be clear here. So if we had, as you speak of the potentially the OPP station, and we speak of potentially a parking structure here and the main floor, I'm curious as to why the option of the OPP station hadn't been brought up earlier as opposed to now. So I'm just trying to understand here, are we looking more to the potential main floor of a potential parking thing here, or a parking structure here? Again, I'm just curious as to why we haven't heard anything about the location of the OPP station until now.
In 2017, we got our site selection report from our consultant. Did not include the OPP station. That was a report that was done, I believe the timeline would have been late 2016 into 2017. That wasn't that long ago, I agree. I'm not sure why it didn't appear in our report either, and I'll be honest, perhaps we didn't ask sharp enough questions about that in that timeline. I'm not sure if we were caught by the fact that there may have been a potential location of a county department in the OPB building, subsequent to its being closed as a police detachment, but it wasn't considered, and it didn't come up with our consultants' report, who were directed to investigate sites where the county owned the property.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Fred and Alice, it's my understanding that they wanted the new library all on one floor. And one of the complaints at the current site was there's no parking there. And if you want parking at your library and you want a 25,000 square foot library, I'm not sure that's all going to fit on that OPP site. The advantage to where you are now is it's high and dry because they've had flooding, but that's an old building. And I'm sure they have new modern techniques to stop flooding when you're building in a floodplain. So I was just wondering about that because when we were looking at OPP sites, that site was not large enough to build what we were building and include parking. So maybe you could comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gatward, when we talk about a multi-floor library, the thing we have to consider immediately is staffing. Because when you have the door open and the lights on, you have to have people who are covering or aware and supervising the space. So multi-floor always means that you need, so that's a consideration, is having the staffing of multi-floor. But that doesn't eliminate the idea of multi-floor. Well-designed multi-floor, which also includes your administrative spaces and things, could work quite well. When we talked as a board about the SILAP site, we were considering a multi-floor structure with the hope that perhaps the upper floors could get some aspect view of the river. So we're not averse to a multi-floor building, a well-designed one, with the understanding that we would have to staff floors while we're open is something that the board's aware of, but it hasn't, and it's not something that eliminates a design if it's multi-floor. Okay.
Any other questions to the presenter? It's always too bad when a building that looks like a library can't be used as a library. We've seen it with all the Carnegie libraries that were built with stairs and made very regal and very stately, and all of a sudden it's a nightmare and needs to be repurposed. So it's too bad that we couldn't work within the parameters of your building, because it is such a beautiful building. But we have heard you, and it's good that you're buying into the new downtown plan. So we'll revisit it, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
We're going to go to 4C now, which is the presentation by Watson and Associates. It's in your package.
Your Worship, through you, if you wouldn't mind, I will just introduce our speaker tonight and just give council a flavor of what we're doing this evening. So this is part of our process, the 5-year process to implement a new development charge bylaw, which allows us to charge development charges for development. In a few minutes, we'll have a presentation from our consultant. We've distributed a fairly large amount of information, which is feedback coming in and out. Related to this, we've had a few separate public meetings where we've met with stakeholders and we've received comments to them. We're providing feedback back to them. Council doesn't have to make a decision on this evening. It's really just an information gathering session. And at the July Corporate Development Committee, that committee will be receiving what we would call the final recommendation report for a new development charge background study. It'll include a summary of the background study itself, as well as the summary of all the feedback and all of the staff answers, and it'll have the draft development charge bylaw presented at that time. So Byron Tan is an economist with Watson and Associates, and he will be presenting just the summary information for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO, Michael. Again, good evening, Your Worship, members of council, county staff, and the members of the public. As previously introduced, this presentation is the mandatory public meeting under the Development Charges Act. The purpose of this meeting is to receive input from the public as this DC process is nearing completion. As mentioned, there is no decisions that need to be made tonight. This is all information purposes to talk about the process as it's gone to date and the future steps. So the format of the public meeting, we're just going to go through the proposed policies, charges, and then if there's any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to let me know. I'll be happy to answer any of them. And then afterwards, we hope to get any comments or feedback from the public regarding the development charge background study and any other questions from council. So just to provide you some background information, the study has started as of May of 2018. Our firm has worked with county staff to develop the growth forecasts, policy review, all the capital works, as well as any other items that are required in order to complete the background study. We did come here on January of 2019 to present a council workshop to explain the changes to the Development Charges Act as per Bill 73, the Smart Growth for Our Communities Act 2015, which was effective as of January 1st, 2016. So that council workshop did explain all of the changes and all of the methodology required for the development charges process. So I'll be touching upon it briefly, but will not be going through it in depth. As you can see, we did have the stakeholder meeting prior to the release of the background study on May 10th, and where we received initial feedback and explained the position of the county as well as all of the policies that were being presented. We presented the draft background study on May 23rd, which was uploaded to the county's website. And then shortly after that, once the study was released, we gave the opportunity for another stakeholder meeting to provide any more comments. As it was alluded to earlier, we did have questions and comments from the stakeholder community, which was circulated this evening, and the answers and responses to those are in front of you. And today is the public meeting of council. As you can see here, we do have an addendum report that will be released in early July. I'll explain this further in the presentation, but through the stakeholder process as well as other identifications from other studies, there have been several changes to projects relating to water, wastewater, and roads, and it warrants an addendum report, which will be presented shortly after this public meeting. And then the council consideration of the bylaw on July 23rd. So just to give a brief overview, development charges are capital costs that can be recovered through by the municipality from developers for residential and non-residential growth. These capital costs are in addition to any subdivision costs that would be captured by the developer, and municipalities are empowered to charge a development charge, and that is part of the Development Charges Act. Some limitations for the services: you cannot collect for general administration of the municipality. Arts, recreation, culture, museum, and entertainment facilities are ineligible. However, library has remained. Tourism facilities is also ineligible. Provisions for hospitals, parkland acquisition. That parkland acquisition, you do collect under the Planning Act, so there is another mechanism and tool to collect for those, but it is ineligible under the DCA, as well as vehicles and equipment with an average life of 7 years or less. This is so that it continues with larger capital items, not with hammers, weed whippers, or any other minor capital items. And waste management services. As you can see, it says bracket non-waste diversion related. As of January 1st, 2016, waste diversion has been eligible again, and that was included as part of this DC study. The methodology, just a real quick overview. So in order to calculate the DC, we have to identify the amount, type, and location of growth, and that is done through the planning staff as well as our demographics team. And then based on the amount of growth that is identified, we do have to identify the servicing needs in order to accommodate those growth. Identify the capital cost to provide the services that meets the needs. So those are all now the capital projects in order to meet the servicing accommodations for those growth. And then we finally deduct all the costs that would be ineligible, such as any grants, subsidies, or other contributions, benefits to existing development, the 10% deduction. This was instilled actually from the 1997 Act, so that municipalities do still have skin in the game in order to fund portions of capital costs, so that it won't be bared 100% by developers. And then the amount in excess of the 10-year historical service standard calculation. As discussed back in January of 2019, we do a service standard calculation for most of the services other than water, wastewater, and storm. And what that is it provides an upper ceiling as to what you can collect. So you cannot collect more than the average that you have historical service over the past 10 years. And then finally, any DC reserve funds. So from one bylaw to the other, if you've already collected funds for prior projects, they would be applied to the totality of the calculations as well, so that you're not double dipping because you've already collected from prior development. And then finally, the net cost would then be allocated between residential and non-residential. This is mandatory. And then from there, you would divide the growth. You would divide the cost by the growth, so you would divide the residential cost divided by the gross population forecast, and then for the non-residential, you would divide it by the square footage that is forecasted. Quick overview of Bill 73, which was the Smart Growth for Our Communities Act. So one of the main items that was introduced was this idea of no additional levies. And what that restricts a municipality from doing is requiring developers from paying into any additional funds that are not captured under the development charges or their local service policy. So you cannot require a developer to pay anything in addition to whatever is stated from these policies. The annual reporting requirements, so the treasurer just has new formats that they must follow to submit to the province. The background study must be available 60 days prior to the bylaw passage, and as you see from the timeline that I had presented earlier in the presentation, we do meet that requirement. And as well, the need to consider area rating as part of the background study. This was discussed back in January during the council presentation. It was noted that your current policies do impose water, wastewater, and storm on a area-specific basis for the urban services, and it was suggested that we continue that going forward. Just a quick overview of the exemptions under the DCA. You do have mandatory exemptions that you must follow. Industrial building expansions, they may expand up to 50% of their footprint without having to pay a DC. Now, we have set up your bylaw in a way so that we do draw a line in the sand, so an industrial development cannot expand 50% one time, not pay a DC, come back a year down the road, apply for another 50% expansion and not have to pay. So we did make sure that that was not going to happen. For the residential intensification, you may add up to 2 apartments to a single as long as it doesn't double the size of a home. And then likewise, for medium and high density, you may add 1 additional unit and not have to pay a DC. And then for cross-government, you cannot charge a DC for an upper or lower tier. Unlike yourselves, you guys are a single tier, so that doesn't really apply, and as well as school boards. So if the school were to create a building, you wouldn't charge them a DC. Likewise, if you were to create a building, the school board doesn't charge you their education development charge. Discretionary exemptions, these are exemptions that are allowed to be passed by council that aren't mandatory, so every municipality has a different type of discretionary exemption. The more popular ones that you'll see is to reduce the DC in whole or in part by development or class. By development would mean, would you like to discount industrial, commercial, institutional, and then by class would be churches, farms, etc. You may phase in the DC over time. Council has the ability to phase in a charge if they deem that the charge increase is too high. And as well, you have redevelopment credits to recognize what was being replaced on site. So for example, if my house burns down, I should have the opportunity to rebuild without having to pay a DC. over a period of time. Normally, it's between 4 to 5 years. The current discretionary exemptions for the county are for non-residential farm building. Through this DC process, it has been identified with staff that farm bunkhouses would like to be added as part of your discretionary exemptions. And what that is temporary dwelling units for housing of seasonal farm workers. And that's for council's consideration. Local service policies, as I mentioned earlier, with the addition of no additional levies, you cannot impose additional charges on a developer that is not within the local service or within the development charges. And therefore, we, as a firm, worked with county staff in order to enhance the current local service policy that you do have, and that is found within Appendix E of the development charges study. Just a quick overview of the relationship between servicing growth versus funding. If you do have, it is not mandatory to have development charges. However, in looking at this graphic, if you do have growth and new users, capital is required to service them. So there are two ways of funding it, whether you have development charges, and if you choose to exclude those, then you would have to you would have to fund them through rates, property taxes, or your existing reserves. So it is a balancing act. Again, it's not mandatory to have, but it is your decision as to how to best fund the growth. The historical growth forecast and the future growth forecast presented here, as you can see in the black, is your historical building permits that have been issued for low, medium, and high density over the past 10 years. The red line that you see across the chart is your average historical. As you can see, in 2018, you did have a boom in development where 442 building permits were issued, and that's a mix of low, medium, and high density. So with this forecast moving forward, we have identified an average of 300 units per year. And as you can see, the dark blue is your low density, light blue is medium, and the yellowy orange is the high density. The growth forecast summary, we have used 4 different forecast periods. For the soft services, we've used the 10-year, and that is looking at your libraries, ambulance, indoor-outdoor recreation, etc. So that provides a net population increase of just under 8,000 people, or translates to over 3,100 units. And that's about just under 5,000 square feet of non-residential building. And then we have the long-term that we've used for roads, and that's about 17,000 people. And again, that goes to 2041, 6,800 units, and just over 9 million square feet of non-residential. And you'll see there's 2 different urban build-outs. One was with full services and one is with water. There are currently areas within the county that are only serviced with water and not sewer. And that's why you'll see the difference between the two. Water is just slightly higher, 23,880 versus the 23,700. And then 9,300 units versus the 9,180. The summary of services considered, you'll see the countywide versus the urban area. We've continued the similar services that were in the 2014 DC study for the 2019. We have services related to highway, which is your roads, sidewalks, street lights, fire protection, police, indoor-outdoor recreation, library, ambulance. And you'll notice that we've split up your studies into 2 separate categories, engineering and community services. I'll come back to that, but this is actually done preemptively due to Bill 108, which has been received royal assent over the past month. And I'll come back to that later on. I'll move on to that in a later slide. But we've preemptively set it up so that if there are any changes in the future, it'll be easily transitioned towards. And as well as you can see, waste diversion, that is a new service as well that we are adding, again, eligible under Bill 73, Smart Growth for Our Communities Act. And we're continuing the urban area services for water, wastewater, and storm. The current DC rates, effective as of September 1st of last year, you can see it's large to small units, so going from singles all the way to retirement homes. We're looking at $24,150 currently for a full charge, including urban services. Multiples are just about $7,000. Apartments greater than 2-bedroom are at $14,060. 61. Apartments with less than 2, $11,050. And again, a retirement home, basically a per unit charge, would be at the $7,945. They've also provided a non-residential per square foot at $6.74. Just after the release of the DC background study back on May 23rd, there have been a few changes to the capital project since then. As you saw during the timeline, there was a stakeholder review shortly after the release of development charge study, which prompted changes to the capital program. Part of that, as well as the Paris Servicing Master Plan, which was undertaken concurrently with the DC study. Updated costs have been provided from that study and have therefore been updated to the DC. As well as staff have adjusted funding sources for the Bishopsgate improvements and interchange based on government grant applications. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the services that have been revised because of the above are the services related to highway, which are your roads, wastewater, and water services. To provide the revised calculated DC rates, and again, this was calculated from last week, we are now looking at $30,040 for a single detached home. Multiples are just over 19,300. Apartments, 19,900. And then apartments for 1 bedroom or less is at 11,600. And retirement homes are now at 10,673. And alternatively, for non-residential, it is now at $7.26 per square foot. So to give you a comparison from your current DC studies to what was released in May 23rd and what's calculated on June 20th, you're currently at $24,150. The charge from the release of the background study was at $30,042. The changes because of all the capital is at $30,040, which is a reduction of $2. However, what I'd like to note is now the shift is from the urban area services to the county-wide services. So you will see that during the release of the background study, it was at $16,428. And now it has actually increased to $17,000. Alternatively, your urban services charge has decreased from $13,600 to $13,000. So it is just more of a shift towards a county-wide approach rather than the urban area. And again, for the non-residential, we're going from $6.74 to $7.24, but then this is an increase of 2 cents to $7.26. The shift from the urban area to the county-wide just resulted in a residential, non-residential shift, so that's why that would explain the increase on the non-res versus a decrease on the residential side. Just to give you a background on the comparator for single detached within the area, you're between the lower half of the comparators, you do have Brantford, Ingersoll, Haldeman, a little bit less than you. But then with the update, you see that you've just surpassed, moving a little bit forward past Niagara Falls, Niagara-on-the-Lake, and the Brantford intensification area. And you still have all the Haltons and the Waterloo region still on the far left of this graph. For non-residential commercial, you are on the low end of the comparator, so you're currently you're underneath Brantford and Ingersoll, and with this revised rate, you just move up a little bit past them. And again, you'll still see all the other municipalities that still have higher commercial development charges per square foot. And lastly, for industrial, there are 3 municipalities on this list that currently waive industrial development. And then other than those 3, you are still on the lower end. And then if you can see on the red, those are the upper tier. Green is single tier or lower tier, and then the blue is just your education development charges. And with your update, you've just moved past the Brantford industrial, but still below their intensification area. So just to touch upon Bill 108 briefly. So Bill 108 has received portions of it on royal assent. Draft regulations have been released. The main changes are to the Development Charges Act as it affects the county is soft services will be removed from the DCA, and hence I mentioned earlier that administration studies we have separated out so that it is a little bit easier should that time come. Payments and installments, rental housing as well as non-residential developments will be paying their DC in 6 annual installments. So it'll just be up to the county to have to track these payments over each DC treasurer statements. As well for nonprofit housing, they'll be able to get 21 years to be able to pay their DC off. And then with regards to the DC amount to be determined, currently it's at building permit stage. The proposal would change it to application for site plan and zoning amendment. It won't affect Brant County too much as portions of your DC is already calculated during a site plan signing as well as site plan implementation. So it's not too much of a change for you. For the community benefits charge, the bylaw may impose community benefits for capital facilities services. So it'll be similar to the DCA, except it'll be a separate regime. The services may not include services authorized by the DCA, so you will have 2 entities so that one will not affect the other. And the community benefits charge will be a percentage of the value of land as of evaluation date, which would be the day before building permit issuance. So it will be based on an assessed value of the land, and that will come, and the percentage will be released later on in the coming months. Similar to the DC, all monies will be put into a special account, so it'll be just like a reserve fund, and the transitional provisions will be set out eventually. And just lastly, based on this timeline, Bill 108 has been moving along fairly quickly. It started on May 2nd of this year, when it received first reading, and within a month and a few days, it already received royal assent. So as of right now, you would be falling under stage 2. So the county would basically pass the DC bylaw as it is, including the current soft services. Once the effective date of the proclamation takes into place on January 1st, we would have until January 1st, 2020 until January 1st, 2021 to separate out the charges of the soft services from the DC and create a community benefit charge. And as I mentioned earlier, with the changes outlined within the presentation, we'll be preparing an addendum report that will be released in the coming weeks prior to the bylaw passage, and at which time council will be able to view it as well as the public, and bylaw passage will be scheduled for July 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to declare the public hearing regarding the development charges background study bylaw open. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this? Is there any member of council that wants clarification in the form of a question without engaging the presenter in a debate? Councillor Miller.
I don't care to debate, but I do have a question if that's okay.
That would be great.
Okay, thank you. To you, to the presenter, you didn't put it on your list here, but I believe it's the case with Bill 108. Affordable housing or social housing has been taken out, is that correct?
Yes.
So if we wanted to kind of get some monies for that, we have to go with that CBC. Is that your understanding?
The draft regulations don't specify it yet, so we're still unclear as to how the province will proceed with those.
Is that? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. Question, do you have any insight as to whether the CBC, the community benefit charges for those elements that come out of development charges will result in lower returns to the county, or will they be held at the same level as in development charges as we have them today?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as of right now, we are unsure because we do not know what the percentage of the valuation is for the properties. So until we get that percentage, we're not sure whether it'll be higher or lower.
What's the scuttlebutt?
What's in the air? Do you have any hints as to what Mr. Bell's looking for?
For higher or lower?
I'm interested in your opinion as a consultant in this area, whether we can expect a shock or a pleasant surprise.
Not one to see the province provide more funds for municipalities as a recent trend. So with that going forward, we could see it either being potentially the same or perhaps less. But again, I'm not sure until we get the actual percentages.
Thank you.
Any other questions to the presenter? Okay, I'm going to ask for the second time whether there's any members of the audience that would like to come up and speak to the presenter. Sir, if you want to come to the podium and state your name and your agency or your address, please.
Good evening. Matt Johnston, a registered professional planner with Urban Solutions. Just have a question. I saw commentary regarding allocation for the Bishop's Gate interchange, and I'm curious to know if there's any allocation for the Grand River Street North EA as part of a DC project, and if it's been included, could you confirm that? If it hasn't been included, is that something that can be considered? Thank you.
That's a big question. Does staff want to speak to that?
Through the mayor, through the mayor to the questioner. First question was about the Bishopsgate interchange, and actually you will see in the addendum report there has been some changes to those costs in there, and then we have adjusted the cost based on a grant application which was recently made for part of that project, and some reallocation of the benefit to existing, so that will be in the addendum report. And secondly, Grand River Street North is in the development charge. And in the addendum report, you'll see a different cost estimate. We did realize that as we were doing the final lab, we had done some of the previous estimates some time ago, and we have better estimates now.
Thank you. You good with that? Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions from council on clarification from the presenter for the second time? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for the third time if there's any members in the audience that has anything that they want to ask to the presenter before we call it a day? No? Any questions or clarification from council for the last time to the presenter? Oh, thank you very much. And we don't have to decide on anything tonight, but thanks for the heads up.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I now declare the hearing closed. Number 5 on the agenda, Councillor Howe's resolution.
We have to.
I'm sorry? Oh, how do you want to deal with the delegation? Sorry. First one, Councillor Chambers? Yeah. No, well, we're going to thank them for the check, so the next one is the library one. I've already thanked them for the check.
I was going to make a motion with regard to the library one.
Thank you.
I'm up?
Yep.
Okay, I'll move that we encourage the library board to continue to examine options for the location of the new main branch/administrative complex for the Brant County Library System.
Perfect. Seeking seconder, Councillor Ferrier. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And can I get someone to, yep, Councillor Pierce?
Move to receive the report.
Yep, seeking a seconder, Councillor Bell. Any other conversation? All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you. Sorry for overstepping that. We're now going to go to number 5A and B, adoption of the minutes from previous meetings. Councillor House.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bell to approve the minutes from the previous council meeting of May 28th.
Any questions? Call the vote to receive. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 6, any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we'll go to consent items. Councillor Bell?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Howes, that the following consent items be approved. That the strategic asset management policy, brackets SAMP, close brackets, and roads and structures addendums be approved.
Any conversations, questions to the report? Councillor, oh. No questions? Councillor Bell?
More of a comment,
Okay,
if that's permitted.
sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll step back. This is really important stuff for us as a council. And I would like to express my concern that when this came up at our recent CDC meeting, we didn't spend enough time talking about this and understanding the implications. Let me just give one example, and it actually comes from the question I think I asked about how much effort this will take to implement and maintain. And the answer I got was, we do an awful lot of this anyway, so it won't be too much more in addition. If you look at the minutes of the John Noble Home meeting, that's a part of our package tonight, they have to go through the same process as a part of their activities with the city. And they made it very clear that they won't be able to accommodate this without quite a bit more effort on their part. Now, that's just a microcosm of the totality of what we have. And I would just like to express my concern, or my request is, I think, to the staff to look harder at how much extra effort we will need to really, A, produce the plan, and then B, maintain it at the standard that we are being expected to maintain it by the province. There's an awful lot in there, and it is so crucial to the way this county will operate and the way this county will prepare its budget that I think we did not give this item enough time last time around. As far as the policy is concerned, I think it's a good piece of work and I can support it, but it is it's a lot of work coming down the chain on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, did you want to speak to that?
Certainly, Your Worship, and through you, and I think I mentioned at the last meeting, we did do some upstaffing last year through the budget, and the previous year through the budget as well, which contemplates this. Maybe something that Council hasn't seen yet that's worth noting is last year we spent a lot of time doing an operations review. We actually had a consultant come in, do quite a bit of work, and we haven't really brought that forward to Council because we've still got a bit of work to do, but that was part of some of our recommendations through the budget, the 2019 budget, for upstaffing in the infrastructure group, that additional project engineer and those additional project technicians that were approved. So I would, in terms of the concern, would suggest that at this point we believe we are appropriately staffed and resources to start this journey. And this is the policy itself is really the start of an asset management journey that has a few years in it. And I think our position is we do have adequate resources in place. And if we didn't, we'd be noting that in the report. So that's my comment, Mr.
Thank you very much. Are you okay with that, Councillor Bell? Are you comfortable with that?
I am. I'm just pleased to hear that staff is recognizing what's coming down the way. I think it requires actually now a greater interaction between staff and council, because if you look at what the council are committed to do in developing this asset management plan, we have to sign off effectively levels of service. I don't know what all the levels of service are for all the things that are composed in the or are part of the budget that we approve. So there's probably an extra step that's needed in our budgeting that says before we launch the budget exercise, county staff should agree with council that they are comfortable with the level of service.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Ferrier?
I'm just through you to staff if possible. Could that be done through some educational sessions pre-budget? I mean, we'll probably have fewer of them than we did this year with all the new council, but is that an exercise that would be worthwhile? Michael?
Through your worship, we'll take that back, and I don't want to, having not been discuss that. It's good. It's a good notion, and we'll take it back and give consideration to that as what's the appropriate way for us to get council fully understanding what our level of service is and how are we basing the budget on that level of service. So Mr. Walton and I can discuss further, and we'll come back to you with that.
Everyone's okay with all of that? I'll call the vote then, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Consent items to be received. Councillor Miller has them for B and C.
I don't have C, but I do have B.
They're all on the same list.
All right. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Gatward, that the consent items to be received as information, 7B and 7C. And if I could, Mr. Mayor, I'll speak to 7B too.
Right, and I think Councillor Pierce wants one separated too.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, thank you, through you, 7B7 from the library.
7B7, thank you. Councillor Gatward? 7B5, sounds like we're playing bingo. Councillor Miller, what was your number?
2.
2. All right. Councillor Pierce, you want to go first?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, yeah, for the 7B7 there on the library, in the minutes, and it talks of actually business arising, I would suggest it's from the previous minutes of that. It talks of the CEO reported that on March 26, 2019, County Council approved the spending of $75,000 from capital reserves for elevator upgrades to be completed in the summer. I do recall that. Has work started on that? We're pushing July now. I'm just curious, has the work started on that? Do we have an understanding of how long that's going to take?
Councillor House, do you have information?
The work is complete.
Perfect.
Thank you. Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just item number 2, that's the response from the provincial government regarding the cannabis odor complaints. And I just want to, on the record, that I'm extremely disappointed with that response. And I read the letter, and he does, reading the letter, he doesn't have, Mr. Hardeman does not have a good handle on what's going on out here. And to invoke the Farm and Food Production Protection Act, I mean, it's just, anyways, extremely disappointed with that. And I guess it's back to the drawing board as far as this goes, and we'll have to look to the federal government to help us out with this, so, because the provincial government has basically washed their hands of it. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's sort of the response you were expecting, though. It's terrible. It is terrible. Councillor Gatward?
I'd like to also add to that, they're talking about specifically Health Canada. Health Canada does not notify us that they're issuing licenses for cannabis production facilities. They do it, and they don't tell us. And yet we're supposed to be calling them if it's a licensed facility. Well, maybe they should give us some information.
I'll call someone for you, Joan. Are there any others that want to be separated? If not, I'll call the motion to oh. Okay. Okay.
Number 5, there's a letter from Mr. Ferguson, and I believe he lives at Telfer Place. And I think it was done on a typewriter by the look of the print.
I think it's Mrs. Ferguson.
Is it Mrs. Ferguson?
I believe so.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that.
That's okay.
Anyway, I thought it was a great letter, and I hope it's been referred to the input for the Class A, that staff will take that letter into serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier?
Yes, just on this, it was suggested by a resident that we should maybe hold a information session or some sort of consultation at Telfer Place with the seniors there. And Councillor House and I have talked about this, and we'd be more than happy to attend something like that with a staff member if it helps to make sure that the folks at Telfer Place are heard and also feel heard on this issue. Because again, with some of the mobility issues, it can be something else, and with some of the medication issues, to get out to some of the consultations. So something so directly affecting them, I think it would be a worthwhile use of resource to attend something there, even if it's just over lunch hour, and we'd be happy to attend as the ward councillors for that ward.
Yeah, I would be happy to make that call for you up there, because I'd like to. They do worry about a lot of things, and they have a lot of time to talk, and they are concerned, and they're really not complaining. They truly are concerned. So I'll make that call and set up that meeting for Councillor House and Councillor Ferrier. Councillor House.
And just one small piece that you might find interesting, Councillor Gatward, Mrs. Ferguson was one of the select number of people who attended our Paris Master Plan open house at the fire hall 2 weeks ago, and spent time trying to digest all of the information board. So she's certainly an interested citizen.
And that's great. Thank you.
Any other comments before we call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Thank you. Committee reports. A, the OPP Detachment Committee report.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Chambers, that the OPP Detachment Committee report for June 3rd be approved, noting there is one recommendation.
Any questions to Councillor Pierce? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Community Service Community report.
Moved by
Councillor Pierce?
myself, seconded by Councillor Bell, that the Community Service Committee report of June 3rd be approved, noting there are two recommendations.
Any questions to Councillor Pierce? All those in favor? Thank you. Planning Advisory Committee report. Councillor Wheat.
It's moved by myself and seconded by Member Bell. The Planning Advisory Committee report of June 4th be approved, knowing there are 4 items.
Any questions for Councillor Wheat? Call the vote. All those in favor to receive? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Wheat. Corporate Development Committee report, please, Councillor Chambers.
Mr. Mayor, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pierce that the Corporate Development Committee report of June 10th, 2019 be approved.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Are there any questions to Councillor Chambers? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, on the, I believe it was the in-camera part on 8D, it notes as Mayor Davis.
It says Mayor Davis?
I just wanted to
Yikes.
confirm that.
Maybe I didn't get the memo. We'll correct that.
Thank you.
With that correction being made, all those in favor? Thank you. Yikes. Public Works, please. Councillor Gatward.
It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Miller, that the Public Works Committee report of June 11th be approved, and there's 8 recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions to Councillor Gatward? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I've got a few of them on here.
Okay.
So for recommendation number 1, when it talks about the delay from August till December, does that have a cost attached? And if so, these mics are really working good, aren't they? If so, because it's Brantford asking for the delay, are they going to be paying any additional cost because of that delay?
Councillor Gatward?
Well, we had quite a discussion about this, Councillor Pierce. At first, I wasn't sure we should delay, but staff assured us that an extension would work and that if any conditions changed on the roadway, we could shut it down at any time. There was no discussion about the city paying additional costs for delaying, and that's something that we could probably look at in the future at another meeting if there are additional costs.
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I think that's pertinent to do that because we're ready to go here.
Yeah.
We're not the ones wanting this delay, and if the city needs to have a delay, that's fine in order for them to do some things. But if there is additional fees, I don't think that we should be on the nut for those.
Good, thank you. What else do you have, Councillor Pierce?
So that was number 1. For recommendation number 7, it says, and whereas the consequences for non-compliance will enhance the success of the program. I'm curious about that. How can non-compliance enhance it? Is this a typo or?
Councillor Gatward?
Just a second
But
here.
it states, and whereas consequences for non-compliance will enhance.
Yes. If you read the whole report,
I've captured it here.
if you read the whole report, what that's referring to, we're charging substantial fees for non-compliance,
Right?
and that will enhance the success of the program.
So if I'm done.
People will want to comply because they don't want to pay $200 or $300 if we can't get in to read their meter.
Okay.
It's written a little differently, but
Yeah, I did read the report, but it was just, it's kind of unusual that a non-compliance is going to enhance something. But, okay, I'll take that. For recommendation number 8, so does this mean that Brantford will not participate for the full 5 years? Or is there an opportunity of them to come in at any point during that?
Well, we were disappointed they withdrew, particularly since they have far more farms in their municipality now, since boundary adjustments took place.
Right?
Councillor Miller sits on the Rural Water Quality Program, and he mentioned at the meeting that they were still going to try and have the city participate. I don't know if he has any further updates on that.
Councillor Miller, do you have anything to clarify?
Just, no, it doesn't mean that they're out for the 5 years, but they are out for this year. So every year or on an annual basis, they can re-enter.
And I think they probably did that during their budget cutting process.
Potentially.
Councillor,
Are you finished, Councillor Pierce?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, but I'm not. I've just got a
Okay.
couple more here.
All right.
So, and I'm not, okay, I'll take that on recommendation number 8, the way it's written there for the 5 years, but at any rate. On the previous minutes, it's got lighting at the roundabout would be reviewed. Has this been done? What was the outcome?
I'll refer that to the general manager. Mr. Walton, could you please answer?
Through the mayor to Councillor Pierce. At the last Public Works Committee meeting, we had a question of the questioners on that as to what they actually, where they felt the problems were. We do not understand that it is at the places of coming into the roundabout. On Rest Acres Road, that won't be an issue because there will be lighting extended as that project is completed over the next 2 years. We do need to look at it in a little bit more detail on power lines to see whether there actually is any issues there.
Okay, I appreciate that answer because I think going into that roundabout now, it's well lit. So I think that something has been done with that. Last one, Mr. Mayor, I promise. It says, Councillor Gatwer reviewed the ongoing, this is the intersection of 53 and Colburn Street West. Councillor Gatwer reviewed the ongoing concerns about the traffic flows and delays at the intersection, and it was noted that this is a provincial intersection that the ministry has not historically been supportive of changes. It was suggested that the Brant County OPP forward its concerns directly to the ministry. Two things. Do we know if that has been done? Have they forwarded the concerns to the ministry? And are we talking like Rest Acres and Colburn Street West here? Because I was under the understanding that we're talking that intersection with the lights, correct?
That's correct, Councillor Pierce. It's that intersection, and I've had several complaints, and MPP Booma's office has had complaints as well.
Right.
And I haven't given up on that, even though it's a provincial intersection. And I'm not sure that the OPP have contacted directly through to the Minister of Transportation. However, they did in their OPP town hall meetings and to our CAO identify that intersection as a problem intersection.
I'm glad you went there, Councillor Garber, because I was going to say they did bring that up, and I'd be more than happy at the next community service to bring that up to the detachment commander to suggest again that they take that concern to the ministry.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier.
Yes, this is a question through you to either Councillor Gabbard or Councillor Miller. I had somebody ask me about the Grand River Conservation Authority Rural Water Quality Program, and specifically when Brantford pulled out. My understanding is that Brantford declined in their budget process. Is that correct?
I believe that's probably when they withdrew their support. They have been involved previously, and as Councillor Miller indicated, this is a 5-year agreement for us, but the city is pulled out for 1 year.
At least this year. But just, this is the part I want to clarify, because somebody said, well, to me, they asked, did they do this because we had not agreed to be on a joint services committee? And my understanding is that wasn't the case. That in fact, they renewed on this joint funded service well before the request to have a joint service committee was even made to us. I just want to make sure that that's correct.
Oh, I have no idea if it's related to that or not. I just
If it was in their budget, it would have been
felt it was budget related, and
beforehand.
I'm sure we could, or anyone could find out from the city clerk why that was not supported.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Councillor Chambers.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. It's a question not regarding the recommendations, but regarding the Public Works, and that is with regard to the gravel to hard surface program. It's my understanding that the gravel roads that are being hard surfaced this year, for example, the East Quarter Town Line and the 7th Concession, are leftover projects that were approved last year and are being completed this year. And further to that, that there are no additional roads that were approved this year for gravel to hard surfacing other than ones that were not completed in last year's program. Is that correct?
Councillor Gatward.
Yes, Councillor Chambers. At budget time, that was brought forward by staff that they needed to catch up with the roads that were behind. They hadn't spent the budget money from the previous year. I think they had about half of it left still. So it was felt that at budget time it was prudent to not throw another pot of money in that we're not going to spend, but catch up with the roads that we've already started and finish those before we move on. So you're absolutely correct.
Councillor Chambers, a second question?
Just further to that, it is confusing when people are told that there will be no additional roads hard surfaced this year, and then they see roads being hard surfaced, and it is because it is a carryover from last year. So I hope that's the correct understanding, and that no roads, additional roads other than that, are being approved, or they should be approved by council.
There may be something in the maintenance budget, some work that needs to be done. I'm not totally familiar with the list of projects that we're doing maintenance on, but as far as I'm aware, there's no roads on the gravel road lists that are to move forward to hardtop being done this year, correct?
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Councillor Miller.
Not a question per se, but I just want to, if there's another question, make a comment that I did ask that Mike Tout's winter control report be circulated to members not on the Public Works, because there was some good information in there. And Mike was talking about how we normally have money leftovers from snow removal and whatnot. And given the way the winters are going and such, and we're putting a lot of salt on because it's always freezing, it's always precipitation, and salt's gone through the roof, so we probably will not be having that reserve left, or money's left over, which typically went into the reserve. So anyways, just, I thought it was good because I think we're going to be seeing some financial pressures at our next budget session. So I just want to make sure, if you got that report, which you're supposed to get that report, please read it and consider it come 2020 budget.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Bell.
Thank you.
In relation to Brant Safe Streets strategy, it's a bit of a mouthful, I don't know whether it's summer or whether it's some other factor, but I've had more emails in the last 3 weeks on speeding and road safety than I think I had in the previous 3 months. So there's an expectation, as we mentioned, that the public works will moving forward on the strategy. So I'm hoping that staff will confirm that we will get that strategy rolling very, very soon.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier.
Yeah, I'm just going to speak to that, though. Councillor Howes and I received a complaint about a specific speeding issue in a speeding zone, and Councillor Howes asked the OPP to look into it. And they put up the speed spy, and they found that 0.34% of folks were speeding out of a sample size of almost 3,000. So the email was very dire, But the reality of, again, 2,287, not 3,000, vehicles was that 8 were going above 65 kilometers and not very much over. So that's something that we also have to, share that data with the public as well about the scope of the problem. in my opinion.
Mr. Mayor, I think we've gone beyond the report now.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Councillor Gatwood. I think we have to. With everyone being satisfied on the report, we're going to call the vote to accept. All those in favor to receive? Opposed? Carried. Thanks, Count. That was tough, Joan. 8F, Paramedic Services Committee report.
Yes, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McAlpine, that the Paramedic Services Committee report of June 19, 2019 be approved, noting that there is one recommendation made in the report.
Any questions, Councillor Ferrier? Seeing none, all those in favor to receive? Opposed? Carried. Staff reports. We have, yeah, there's 2. Those staff reports?
There's no recommendation.
Nothing, Heather?
So the AMO has just released that they are now accepting delegation requests. So council has already approved the one for the John Noble home just to discuss additional funding. So if there's any others that we wanted to consider, we'll need a resolution to that effect tonight.
Councillor Chambers.
Mr. Mayor, through to you, to council with regard to SCORE has additional delegations scheduled, and there was an email that came to me, and I believe you as well, and I don't know if that was circulated, that if we feel that SCORE can be of assistance in our delegations and vice versa, join up at the association, and you can augment each other's presentations. And SCORE is more than happy to help out with our Brant County resolutions and vice versa.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Gatwood.
Yes, and we did receive letters of support from our neighboring SCORE member municipalities as far as the Bishopsgate Road interchange. We met with Roma, we met at Roma on the interchange, but we haven't, there's been a change in ministers at the provincial level. And I'm wondering, Mr. Mayor, since there's a change, and Carolyn Mulrooney is now the Minister of Transportation, that we should perhaps present our case to her on Bishopsgate Road. And I'm not sure. And as well, you know, SCORE can certainly pitch that for us. They've given us those letters of support, but I don't think we want to pay all those millions of dollars on our own for provincial gravel to be shipped out of our county for their use.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Miller?
I think that's a great one. And I just want to clarify, you did meet with the MTO at Roma, so I'm just thinking that might not be a bad joint one with SCORE, given their support for that. Because, yeah, we've already done it, so maybe the staff under the minister might say, well, you guys were here already. What, anything new? No? Move on. But if we do it with SCORE, maybe. What I would like to request is a delegation with the Minister of Energy, Northern Development and Mines on the Paris Dam, because they did have a FIT program and they pulled it for everything. Water's a little bit different, and there's a lot of good information I don't think that they considered. They treated all renewables the same. Water's the same as wind, it's the same as solar. It's not. It's one of the best, most environmentally friendly ways of producing electricity. At the same time, I seen a nice presentation from the Ontario Water Power, something like that. And they were showing that the supply of electricity in Ontario will be very much in balance, or maybe even slightly less than the demand in about 10 years. And these dams, these low-level hydroelectric power stations take about 10 years to get going. So we actually, if we want to meet demand 10 years out, we need to start doing things now. So I know Brooke from Brant Municipal Enterprises has a lot of information. And I know the GRCA also would like to talk to the minister about their low-level dam as well. So anyways, that's my request that we.
Are you going to bring that forward as a resolution?
Yes.
Yep, seeking a seconder.
I thought we'd put them all together, but.
Councillor Pierce? All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Yep.
Can I just clarify, was that for both delegations or just Councillor Miller's?
I think just Councillor Miller's. I think Councillor Chambers and I will be taking care of the one from SCORE. Yep. I will. You're not going? Oh, I will. Okay. I'll be taking care of the one from SCORE. Councillor Gatward.
So, Mr. Mayor, you don't want to meet with the Minister of Transportation?
We're going to, SCORE is going to meet with Minister of Transportation, and you're welcome to come.
But is that on their agenda, Councillor Chambers?
I believe so, and I don't want to say that it is or it isn't, but if it is,
I think I remember that it is.
I believe that it is.
Yes.
Oh, well, if it's on the agenda, then great, thank you. We don't need to do it twice.
That's right. Anybody else have anything? No? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's no information reports. Communications. The Office of Wilm Balma, MPP Brantford Brant, has requested the County of Brant to host the 2020 PTSD Awareness Day. Councillor Ferrier.
I'd like to make a resolution to agree to this request.
Seeking a seconder? Councillor Miller, any discussion? Everyone's aware of what it is? And
I think it's wonderful, actually. So I write in this field and I teach in this specifically. I've written a few books about PTSD, and this is a really great initiative, and it's great that it's created locally from our local MPP, and that we can support it is wonderful.
the letter came to me, and I thought it should come to council just because it should be a council decision. Any other conversation to it? All those in favor of supporting it? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Questions? No. Resolutions. 13A. Councillor Ferrier.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Miller. 13A, that a joint task force to explore the potential for a joint animal control and pound service program. Whereas the County of Brant, the county, and the City of Brantford, the city, have an interest in the provision of quality and fiscally responsible animal control and pound services. And whereas the two communities currently enjoy a number of positive and efficient partnerships, and whereas the respective communities may realize positive benefits by exploring joint partnerships regarding the delivery of animal service programs, and whereas municipal staff from the county, the city, and other neighboring communities have already commenced preliminary discussion regarding such partnership opportunities, and whereas City Council, at its June Committee of the Whole meeting, recommended that a joint task force be created to explore a long-term joint municipal facility and operational opportunities regarding the provision of animal control and pound services, now therefore be it resolved that the county participate in the joint task force with the mandate to explore the potential for a joint animal control and pound services program, and to recommend options to be considered by the councils of both communities by September 30th, 2019, and that the county select 2 members of council to sit on the joint task force being proposed by the city, and that the task force be supported by county staff.
Okay, that was quick. I hope everyone got all that. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just a question in here, because the one whereas states that municipal staff from the county, city, and other neighboring communities have already commenced preliminary discussions, and then the now therefore states that it states that councils of both communities, which, if I'm reading into that, would suggest the city and the county. Where are the other municipalities, neighboring communities, as it states in there? Are they not involved in the final here?
That would be up to them to discuss with their councils. But I see this as a bit of a win. We had said earlier that we would look at joint services, but we want to do it in a more broad way. And I think by The city has already passed a resolution with very similar language. I think by including other communities as options to join us in these conversations does feed into what we were hoping for initially, which was ad hoc, case-by-case basis, and asking other communities to be a part of it if it was possible and feasible for them.
Okay, if I could, Mr. Mayor, and I absolutely support what you just said there, but the way this reads is it reads that the county, the city, and other neighboring communities have already commenced in preliminary discussions, but it doesn't say anything about the joint task force involving these other neighborhoods. And I'm just worried how that's going to look, because as it says here, the county, it says the county and the city of both communities. I just want to make sure that within this resolution, I'm supporting this, don't get me wrong, but I want to make sure that the now therefore includes the neighboring communities.
To be fair, the neighboring communities piece was because we have spoken to neighboring communities, not Brantford. So it's a bit of a tough one, because I don't think they've actually spoke to the communities that are on our outer border. We have in the past about this. So again, it's to appease that piece. So we'll have to see how the task force goes, but my reading is that it is open to that, and definitely if I was to be on that task force, and I think anybody from the county would push for other communities to be involved if they so chose. We can't force them to.
So I think if it's clear to you, but it's not clear to Councillor Pierce, then we
Yeah.
better fix the wording.
Yeah. Again, Mr. Mayor, not to beat a dead horse here, but I just want to be clear here, because the one paragraph says that municipal staff from the county, the city, and other neighboring communities have already commenced in preliminary discussions regarding such partnership opportunities, which to me, that means we've got the city, the county, and some neighborhood communities that have already discussed the potential of a joint task force here. And then the therefore states that be considered by the councils of both communities. So I'm suggesting that is, as the first line says, the county and the city. So if, bear with me here.
Sorry.
So if the county and the city and neighboring communities have already commenced in preliminary discussions, that means the city knows that there's been discussions with neighboring neighborhood communities, sorry.
But
Councillor Ferrier?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think I see where the confusion is here. We haven't discussed with other communities a joint task force. We have discussed with other communities potential, in very vague, broad strokes, potential partnerships for animal control. But again, nothing formalized.
So we need to adjust the wording, because everything you just explained needs to
Make
be...
a friendly amendment, and I'd
Yeah,
be happy to.
sure.
Yeah, I would absolutely, as I say, I support this 110%. I just think for our best interest, I'd like to make a friendly amendment that we add in there the councils of the county, the city, and any neighboring communities
That may be interested.
that may be interested.
That's acceptable?
It has to be, that's how amendments work, but.
Yeah.
Right? And then, that being said, with that, if you drop down to the next line, that the county select 2 members of council for the joint master proposed by the city. I think we got to be careful with
Well,
that too.
they proposed that. They had the motion first. They did come to us after another joint committee that we were on to discuss this, proposed, and they have already passed this resolution. So it is a creature that they have proposed that we are then either deciding to join with for a task force or not. So they do get the credit of proposing it. I think that's just factual.
Let's give it to Councillor Gatward for a minute, just to break it up.
And I'm in favor of looking at this jointly. However, when I read this, I thought, okay, the city passed it at their June committee of the whole meeting, but Mr. Mayor, have we received any official request from the city to strike this joint task force?
I think
Does the
Heather can
clerk?
answer that.
I don't know that we have on paper, the clerk wants to speak.
It's going to their council tonight as well for ratification.
For approval.
Unfortunately, it was an issue with the timing of when they had their committee of the whole, and they have a different structure around committee of the whole and council than we do.
Mayor Davis and I did speak about it. He approached me at a John Noble Home meeting, after a meeting, and asked me if I could sort of feel out the council and see if there was any interest, because it's something that they wanted to get going as soon as they could. And I said there was interest. There was interest with me, and that's why it's been brought forward this way through Mark. So let's make sure the interest is worded properly. Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a suggestion and an amendment that might solve a lot of problems and confusion. My amendment will be to remove all of the whereas clauses and simply have an operative resolution. Now, therefore, therefore be it resolved that the county participate in a joint task force with the mandate to explore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and the two counties. I think that would basically say that we are willing to work on a task force, which is an embellishment in my mind, but work with the city on animal control, and that eliminates all of the questions. It's just an indication of the city that, yes, we are willing to look at animal control with them, and if they want to call it a task force, so be it. So I'll try that as a resolution, and that would facilitate a lot of the questions that could be resolved if and when they strike this task force.
Councillor Gatward, do you have something to say?
Well, I also wanted to say that I thought the September 30th date was awfully ambitious to try and come to something, some sort of an agreement or recommendations through the summer and have it come forward. It would be at our September council meetings.
October.
I'd be more comfortable putting that down as November myself, but I mean, that's just my opinion. And
Councillor Ferrier.
So the reason the resolution is worded the way it is, and it has gone to staff for some look-see, and I did send it to members of council previous to this to get input. I received none previous to this meeting. The reason it's worded the way it is because I was hoping to match the city's resolution to some degree. I think that's an element of playing fair. Now, if we look at it, they've really wanted us to be on a joint services committee, and they were pretty loud, and there was a lot of rhetoric about it. We are not joining a joint services committee. What we said initially, way back when, was ad hoc, case by case, as needed, and in ways that are sort of fair and open. So one of the things, Councillor Chambers' point about the whereas is that you're right, that the operative would still be what it is and it still work. But the point of why it's been written the way it is to try and match the city and to try and play at the same level as them and to be friendly on, again, this is a big win. This is ad hoc, issue by issue, as we had asked for, not a joint services committee, and there's a lot of other contexts which both councils are very aware of.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So before I decide if I'm going to be in favor of Councillor Chambers, well, I don't know if we even have a seconder on this. I don't know if I can speak to it. I'll second it to get it on the floor.
Good. That's great.
And then I just want to understand, through you, Councillor Ferrier, you're saying you want it to match the city. So within the city's recommendation, do they state and other neighboring communities?
Yes, they did.
Okay, so if they stated and other neighboring communities, I feel it's important that other neighboring communities be in the resolution, because as it stands right now, even if we take all the whereases out of there, it simply states council of both communities. So I'd be more than happy to get rid of any whereas you can, as long as neighboring communities are in there.
Councillor Ferrier.
But we could come back in September and have felt out 2 or 3 other neighboring communities and come back in September 30th and say, and here are some other neighboring communities before it comes to a point. This is just about the 2 communities getting together for an initial discussion, which we can then, September 30th, we could come back and say, we have 3 other municipalities that are interested. It'll become a
Sorry,
bigger...
Mr. Mayor, point of order, though. It's not initial discussions. It states in here that preliminary discussions have already commenced. That's my whole point.
Between staff.
It doesn't
It
say
says
that.
staff right there. Staff from the county, city, and other neighboring communities.
Exactly. So there's already been communications between the county, the city, and other neighboring communities. So it's not initial conversations that will be happening.
It is between the councils, because none of those councils have spoken to any of the other councils on that level.
Can we not just change the word both to all? And that would make,
Yeah, I
It would-
don't want to
make
make
it
a
work.
huge deal of it, but I don't want this to come back to bite us.
Right.
And potentially have the city in a position where they can say, no, this is between you and I.
Councillor Wheat.
Well, it started out pretty simple to me. There's a recommendation there, a resolution, and I'm willing to support it. And we've had 13 other people speak and totally confused the issue, and I'm not any farther ahead now than I was when I read it over the weekend. I'm ready to support what's before us. It's a start. And the September 30th date, that's 3 meetings away.
It is a start, Councillor Wheat, but it isn't clear to all the councillors, so we need to have,
Well, it's clear to me.
well, that's great. So changing the word from both to all should do it, if you want to leave it the way it is, or we can investigate Councillor Chambers. Councillor Chambers.
Actually, I believe the amended motion is in order because Councillor Pierce seconded it.
Yes.
So I just want to be clear what my amendment is, essentially to strike all the whereas verbiage. And the recommendation would simply read, be it resolved that the county be willing to participate in a joint task force with the mandate to explore the potential for a joint animal control and pound services program and to recommend options be considered by both councils. That wording leaves it open to anybody and everybody, and it indicates to the city that we are willing to participate, more than willing, and we're going to select people to sit on it. And that if you strike the whereas clauses, then you're not speaking for the city in any way, and you're not dealing with whether who's talked to who or whatever. It's just, yes, we're willing to talk, and on a joint task force.
Thank you, Councillor
It's
Bell.
very simple.
I think you need some of these whereas clauses, because if you do as Councillor Chambers suggested, and the way he read it out, you don't know which councils you're talking about.
Councillor Chambers.
Could be them all.
Could be them all.
That's why I'm leaving it that way.
Councillor Ferrier.
I don't disagree with Councillor Chambers. I actually prefer that to getting into a lot of nitty gritty here, because my worry is I'd either keep it as is with the one friendly amendment or do what Councillor Chambers is saying, because if we start editing this too much, what may happen is we may trigger a non-matching resolution with Brantford, and then they have to go back to their council, and this gets held up another month. Because as it is right now, they're passing essentially this. We need to pass essentially this in order to get moving now. If we change it too much, then they have to go back to their council, and we're looking at a month or two, and we're looking at November, December, and we're being difficult for the sake of being difficult, in my opinion.
I'm starting to feel like Councillor Wheat now. I'm confused. Heather, can you read out anything we have on the table right now?
The motion on the table right now is that the resolution be amended to read, be it resolved that the county participate in a joint task force.
Be willing to participate.
Be willing to participate in a joint task force with the mandate to explore the potential for a joint animal control and pound services program, and to recommend options to be considered by the councils.
Is that friendly enough for you, Mark, or has it changed everything?
No, that also includes that the county select 2 members and that the task force be supported, the other 2 clauses there. Because Councillor Chambers, I believe, said just taking all the whereases out, but keeping the bottom.
The body of the...
Yes, because there's action there that needs to be in there.
Councillor Gatward?
So the date's being removed?
We're going to have to clear that up.
Because if the date's being removed, then that's fine. I'll support it, because I don't think it's doable in 3 meetings, and that's all that there is July, August, and September. So.
Are you prepared to change the time frame?
No, I'm not.
You're not? Okay. He's not prepared to change the time frame of September the 30th?
Again, because I don't want to trigger them having to change something and it's getting held up by their council. And I don't know that their council's meeting again. I think their council is breaking for the summer after tonight.
So September 30th is in their resolution.
Yes, that's why I put this in here.
So, with all that being said, and much, much more,
So the clerk's going to add that last part because she didn't read that out.
you're going to add the September 30th? And the appointment of 2 councillors?
Yes, so Councillor Chambers, I believe, has concurred to including the rest of the operative clauses, the September 30th, that county select 2 members, and that the task force be supported by staff.
So, hopefully there's no more conversation. We're going to call the vote. Is everyone ready to call the vote?
I'm happy now.
On the amendment? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move to call the vote on the
Yeah.
motion.
Yeah. Now we have to call the vote on the motion as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. That was painful. That was very, is there any new business? Councillor Wheat? Number 18? I'm ready for you. Wait a minute. We're- Thank you. We're now in camera. Pardon me, Councillor Chambers? I believe your postal code would suggest that your hand should be in the air. Check your postal code, put your arm up. Anybody else? Councillor Miller?
No, but we can probably put these back on. I will nominate Brian Coleman, because Brian is very good with animals, so.
Okay. Anyone,
I'll speak on behalf of Colin. That's not fair that he's not here.
I agree, we could change that after.
I would nominate his board mate, Councillor Gavin.
I would like to see a showing of 2 hands would be wonderful, so we don't have to call an election. Mark? Anyone else before we? I'm going to probably be doing it with Mayor Davis afterwards, but we need the 2 county members first. And then I think Kevin and I are going to come on as ex officials.
I'm going to decline because I already sit on 10 committees and I'm busy enough. I'm not going to.
So we got Councillor LaFerriere.
I would really love to nominate Councilor Chambers.
Chambers, you need to be planting beets and corn.
We'll meet whenever he wants. We'll meet at his farm.
Councillor Chambers, are you prepared to?
My rooster got hit on the road the other day, and I had to call out. That's the way I'm talking.
Please don't mention chickens. Yeah. You're not,
I will, if Brian wants to, I would defer to Brian.
okay, so as of tonight, it's Councillor Chambers and Mark. Thank you, and we can move on.
Can we get a resolution?
Resolution? Councillor Howes, seconded by Councillor Bell. All those in favor? Thank you. Being voluntold. Bylaws, Councillor McAlpine.
Moved by myself, seconded by John Wheat, that the following bylaws be read for the first time, bylaw number 7319 through to bylaw number 9219.
Councillor Bell?
Just administrative thing, House 18419 refers to 142 East River Road, I think it's actually 142 West River Road.
We've corrected the actual bylaw, we've got that.
Second reading, Councillor McAlpine? Oh, call the vote. All those in favor? Sorry, second reading.
Second reading, moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Wheat, that the following bylaws, number 7319 through to bylaw number 9219.
All those in favor? Opposed? Third time? Whoop. Councillor Pierce.
I'd like to pull D if I could, and ask a question about it. In regards to the lease agreement between the County of Brant trustees and St. George United Church. I'm in full favor of this renewing again. And I understand that when all these negotiations began and talked through this, it was to go on a yearly basis. Has there been any thought given or any discussion given about potentially making it 2 years or making it 3 years? Or do we feel it's in the best interest of all to leave it at the year? That being said, I know that there was a lot of disagreement, I'll put it, from one of the neighbors when we first put this through, and I'm curious, I haven't seen that particular party here to discuss it, and I'm just wondering if there's been anybody or anything further said.
Councillor Wheat.
At this point in time, I think 1 year at a time, because there's growing pains, to let's see how this evolves, because I'm not totally sure that there might be a bump on the road at some point in time, and if there is, we're only into 1 year, and we can try and resolve that rather than get into a long term. But if you want to make a motion to long term, well then.
I received a phone call last night from a very big bump in the road regarding this parking lot. So I think I would recommend that we keep it on a 1 year term, just because I do think we have to tweak it and change a few things. Do you want to speak to how successful it's been?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I did give written notice to the neighbors who had objected initially that this report was going to be going forward. The recommendation was going to be to renew the lease. I didn't hear anything back from them. I also checked with our bylaw department, and they indicated that there'd been no complaints or tickets issued in the year. So council direction of the initial report was to track any complaints or issues that happened during that sort of trial period before the decision was made whether to have it be continue on a permit basis, terminate the lease entirely, or make it a public parking for another year, and then to examine a permanent parking solution through the master plan process.
Okay, so if I could, Mr. Mayor, okay, so there's that last part is what I was looking for here. So I think that's all part and parcel, because I recall that we were going to do it for the year and then potentially permanent. So it is going to tie into the master plan as well. Okay, perfect. I'm totally cool with that.
Any other questions before we have the third reading? Councillor McAlpine? Third reading?
You gonna pass that?
You have to pass the second.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so third reading, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wheat. Bylaws number 7319 through to bylaw number 9219.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 17, request for special council meeting following July the 9th for corporate development. Councillor Chambers, you voting? Okay, should we, am I just announcing that's a done deal for the special meeting?
Yeah, that's
Okay, before we adjourn, Councillor Chambers has something to say?
Yes, I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, if I could put a congratulatory resolution before council. A couple weeks ago, the Great Brant County Spelling Bee team competed in the annual spelling bee for the Skills Literacy Center, and you were in attendance, and I, as usual, was a judge. But I'd like to tell members of council that our Brant County team did exceptionally well this year. I can't remember the word that eliminated them, but they went a long way compared to the year before. So I would like to move that our clerk, Heather Boyd, Joanne DaCosta from Community Services, and Helen Kennedy from the Records Department, or whatever you call it, be congratulated on their stellar performance at the annual spelling bee that occurred a couple weeks ago. And they actually the event raised over $10,000 for skills and literacy in the county, and I think it was about the 15th or 16th year they've done it, and it's the second year that the county has competed, and they did very, very well. And the CAO was there to cheer them on, and maybe Heather can tell us what word put them out, but they didn't get it right, so maybe she's got it right now. But anyway, that's my motion.
The word was Gasconade.
Well, if Councillor Chambers took the time to say all of that, then I'm going to say that the Brant, or the St. George Historical Society won it. And so it stayed in the county anyway. Councillor Pierce.
If I could, yeah, I'll add to that, congratulations. But speaking of spelling bees, did you know that in the National Spelling Bee this past year, they actually ran out of words for the first time ever? It was unprecedented. They ran out of words, and I think there was eight joint winners the first time ever.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Tuesday, July the 23rd will be the next meeting of this council.
I was worried about that.
Councillor Leverrier, we're adjourned. Thank you.